world, and I'm going to continue making music on that. So I do not have any overarching goal because, to be honest, while growing up, the Grammys always felt like an unattainable dream, that sitting down in India and making music, it's not possible to actually win a Grammy award. But then at the age of 33, I won my first Grammy award and then 2 more after that. So I've stopped thinking about long-term goals, and I just think about what do I need to do right now and what messages do I need to reach out to the world? What do I need to communicate to my audiences through my concerts? And I just focus on that.
You've spoken out about land degradation. You've spoken out, obviously, about climate change. India has got some very strong deadlines or goals, 2030, and what we hope to achieve in cutting down on our emissions. Are you inspired by what the Prime Minister, this government is trying to do? Do you believe it's realistic, or do you believe that it's a pipe dream?
It is actually very ambitious goals, but I see us achieving these goals. Or at least I have the hope of us achieving these goals, especially when it comes to electrification, when it comes to achieving the sustainable development goals by 2030. The Solar Alliance that Prime Minister Modi had announced in 2015 at the climate change conference in Paris is again a beautiful goal about tropical nations all over the world coming together to produce enough solar energy for the global south. So I think these are very ambitious goals, but yet achievable. And I believe that India used to always sit on the sidelines when it came to environmental issues and when it came to issues about partnerships on climate change. But now not only are we participating in these discussions, but we're also taking leadership. So I feel that these goals are achievable, and I've got a lot of hope that India can take the leadership when it comes to mitigating the effects of climate change. Besides
all of your several accomplishments, you're also a global ambassador for kindness. How does that work?
So I'm the global ambassador for kindness for UNESCO MGIP. So it's all about that when it comes to the problems that we face, whether it's social problems or environmental problems, I guess at the basis of all of this is kindness. That if you're just kind to our planet, if you're just kind to the people around us, and if we show a lot of empathy and compassion, then basically at that very generic basic level, we've solved all of our problems. So I guess this whole thing of me being an ambassador of kindness is going back to the roots and figuring out the root of our problems and, and trying to solve that.
I've got a copy of your invite for lunch where the Vice President and Douglas Elmhoff and the Secretary of State, requesting the pleasure of your company for lunch to meet Narendra Modi. So you will get a chance to meet the US Vice President and also the Prime Minister once again. You must be really looking forward to that.
Absolutely. Very much looking forward to that. And of course, I've met Prime Minister Modi a few times. After winning my first Grammy, my second Grammy, I also met him at Johannesburg when Prime Minister Modi had addressed the Indian diaspora there. I did a performance there. And also when he won the Champions of the Earth Award, which is the highest environmental award that the United Nations gives out. In 2018, I think that was in December. So it's going to be really exciting to have this opportunity to meet him again and to celebrate this beautiful state visit between the oldest democracy in the world, one of the oldest democracies of the world, and also right now, by and large, the largest democracy on this planet. Yeah. So it's a partnership that is absolutely important and very beneficial for the entire planet.
But right now you're focusing on yoga, right? That's what you're stretching your limbs out, getting ready to be there at the UN lawns?
I'm just hoping not to embarrass myself.
I'm sure you'll do fine.
So I'm just pulling out all my loose clothing, which I have very little of, and and I'm going to try to do my best.
All right, Ricky, wonderful speaking to you. It's going to be a great visit, and it's going to be a great opportunity for you once again. Thank you so much for sparing some time to speak to NDTV.
Thank you so much. The honor is all mine.
Co-presented.
It's undeniable. We're facing the crisis of the generation, climate change, and it's happening. Not in some far-off distant land or some millions of years away. It's happening now. And it affects everything we know and love. Information around climate change can often feel too distant, too jargony, too scary, too anxiety-filled, too technical, or too political. I'm here to change that. The Climate Explainers, part of NDTV's 6-month-long campaign, building a blueprint for climate action. The climate clock is ticking, but we're just in time.
Facts are the foundation of a news story, but it's the views that shape these stories. Because when you hear views from all sides, you get the complete picture.
23 years of the big fight. This show is not just an ordinary debate show, but it is a responsibility in service of our viewers.
NDTV for news you can trust. No sensationalism, no ugly debates, no agenda. We strive to be transparent and unbiased in our reporting so you can get news that you can rely on.
In a deeply polarized world, where space for disagreement is shrinking, where take it or leave it defines discourse, we take a step back. A debate has many facets, perhaps no one right answer. Left, right and center, conversations that get to the core of the debate. Left, right and center with me, Vishnu Shom, 9 p.m. on NDTV 24/7.
Gadgets 360 is here to help you with all your tech needs.
Gadget 360, Gadget Love.
Gadgets 360, Gadgets Love.
You too can get some gadget love with buying guides, expert reviews, and all the latest news on Gadgets 360.
It's undeniable. We're facing the crisis of the generation, climate change. And it's happening. Not in some far-off distant land or some millions of years away. It's happening now. And it affects everything we know and love. Information around climate change can often feel too distant, too jargony, too scary, too anxiety-filled, too technical, or too political. I'm here to change that. The Climate Explainers, part of NDTV's 6-month-long campaign, building a blueprint for climate action. The climate clock is ticking, but we're just in time.
Facts are the foundation of a news story, but it's the views that shape these stories. Because when you hear views from all sides, you get the complete picture.
23 years of the big fight. This show is not just an ordinary debate show, but it is a responsibility in service of our viewers.
NDTV for news you can trust. No sensationalism, no ugly debates, no agenda. We strive to be transparent and unbiased in our reporting so you can get news that you can rely on.
In a deeply polarized world, where space for disagreement is shrinking, where take it or leave it defines discourse, we take a step back. A debate has many facets, perhaps no one right answer. Left, right and center, conversations that get to the core of the debate. Left, right and center with me, Vishnu Shom, 9 p.m. on NDTV 24/7.
Gadgets 360 is here to help you with all your tech needs.
Gadget 360, Gadget Love.
Gadgets 360, Gadgets Love.
You too can get some gadget love with buying guides, expert reviews, and all the latest news on Gadgets 360.
It's undeniable. We're facing the crisis of the generation, climate change. And it's happening. Not in some far-off distant land or some millions of years away. It's happening now. And it affects everything we know and love. Information around climate change can often feel too distant, too jargony, too scary, too anxiety-filled, too technical, or too political. I'm here to change that. The Climate Explainers, part of NDTV's 6-month-long campaign, building a blueprint for climate action. The climate clock is ticking, but we're just in time.
Facts are the foundation of a news story, but it's the views that shape these stories. Because when you hear views from all sides, you get the complete picture.
23 years of the big fight. This show is not just an ordinary debate show, but it is a responsibility in service of our viewers.
NDTV for news you can trust. No sensationalism, no ugly debates, no agenda. We strive to be transparent and unbiased in our reporting so you can get news that you can rely on.
In a deeply polarized world, where space for disagreement is shrinking, where take it or leave it defines discourse, we take a step back. A debate has many facets, perhaps no one right answer. Left, right and center, conversations that get to the core of the debate. Left, right and center with me, Vishnu Shom, 9 p.m. on NDTV 24/7.
Gadgets 360 is here to help you with all your tech needs.
Gadget 360, Gadget Love.
Gadgets 360, Gadgets Love.
You too can get some gadget love with buying guides, expert reviews, and all the latest news on Gadgets 360.
It's undeniable. We're facing the crisis of the generation, climate change. And it's happening. Not in some far-off distant land or some millions of years away. It's happening now. And it affects everything we know and love. Information around climate change can often feel too distant, too jargony, too scary, too anxiety-filled, too technical, or too political. I'm here to change that. The Climate Explainers, part of NDTV's 6-month-long campaign, building a blueprint for climate action. The climate clock is ticking, but we're just in time.
Facts are the foundation of a news story, but it's the views that shape these stories. Because when you hear views from all sides, you get the complete picture.
23 years of the big fight. This show is not just an ordinary debate show, but it is a responsibility in service of our viewers.
NDTV for news you can trust. No sensationalism, no ugly debates, no agenda. We strive to be transparent and unbiased in our reporting so you can get news that you can rely on.
In a deeply polarized world, where space for disagreement is shrinking, where take it or leave it defines discourse, we take a step back. A debate has many facets, perhaps no one right answer. Left, right and center, conversations that get to the core of the debate. Left, right and center with me, Vishnu Shom, 9 p.m. on NDTV 24/7.
Gadgets 360 is here to help you with all your tech needs.
Gadget 360, Gadget Love.
Gadgets 360, Gadgets Love.
You too can get some gadget love with buying guides, expert reviews, and all the latest news on Gadgets 360.
It's undeniable. We're facing the crisis of the generation, climate change. And it's happening. Not in some far-off distant land or some millions of years away. It's happening now. And it affects everything we know and love. Information around climate change can often feel too distant, too jargony, too scary, too anxiety-filled, too technical, or too political. I'm here to change that. The Climate Explainers, part of NDTV's 6-month-long campaign, building a blueprint for climate action. The climate clock is ticking, but we're just in time.
Facts are the foundation of a news story, but it's the views that shape.
Hello, I'm Sneha Koshi and you're watching News at 10, the 10 o'clock news. There's a lot lined up for you, including Prime Minister's US visit. Just moments from now, Prime Minister Modi will be landing at New York. We have a lot more lined up for you from New York. But for now, first, the headlines. Prime Minister Modi will arrive in New York around 10:30 or just moments from now. Kicking off his first state visit to the US, he will be welcomed by the Indian diaspora and is set to meet several CEOs and thought leaders, including Elon Musk, for the first time since he took over Twitter. On 21st June, International Yoga Day, Prime Minister will lead the Yoga Day celebrations at the United Nations headquarters. A celebration 9 years after the UN established Yoga Day, the Prime Minister's request. After the World Health Organization flagged 7 India-made syrups among 20 drugs linked to over 300 deaths globally, Union Health Minister Mansukh Mandavia has said India follows a zero-tolerance policy on spurious medicines and several steps have been taken. The latest flashpoint between the West Bengal government and governor over an event to celebrate State Foundation Day at Raj Bhavan, despite the chief minister's writing to the governor against it, saying partition was a traumatic, painful day. Against time, as US and Canadian rescue teams are scrambling to search for a tourist submarine that went missing during a voyage to the Titanic shipwreck, with a British billionaire and Pakistani businessman among the 5 people on board. A shocking case from Andhra Pradesh, where a 15-year-old girl ran away from an ashram accusing the seer of rape. He's arrested and had a previous case against him. And Prime Minister Modi is expected to land in US moments from now. The first state visit of Prime Minister Modi that is being seen as a major turning point for India-US bilateral relations, with deeper cooperation in defense industry and sharing high technology in sharp focus. We'll bring you lots more on that over the next 3 days from US, where a series of meetings are being held, including a rare address to the joint session of the US Congress. This will be Prime Minister Modi's second such address, a first for any Indian leader to have done it twice. As he lands today in New York, there are celebrations expected, particularly by the Indian diaspora in US as well, to welcome him. But also, he will be meeting over 20 thought leaders from different sectors, including Tesla founder Elon Musk, psychophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson, Grammy Award-winning Indian-American singer Falguni Shah. And let's just listen in to reactions that have come.
This visit will affirm the deep and close partnership between the United States and India and the warm bonds of family and friendship that link Americans and Indians together. The visit will strengthen our two countries' shared commitment to a free, open, prosperous, and secure Indo-Pacific, and our shared resolve to elevate our strategic technology partnership, including in defense, clean energy, and space. The leaders will discuss ways to further expand our educational exchanges and people-to-people ties, as well as our work together to confront common challenges from climate change to workforce development and health security. As we think about the future of artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and building resilient supply chains for clean energy technologies, semiconductors, and other critical and emerging technology, countering climate change, the future of our workforces, and global health, energy, food security, there is no partner more consequential than India. Now, we're hosting India for an official state visit to put our cooperation on an inexorable trajectory as we support India's emergence as a great power that will be central to ensuring U.S. interests in the coming decades. After years of strengthening our ties, the United States-India partnership is deeper and more expansive than it has ever been in the past.
And as Prime Minister Modi is set to address the joint session of the US Congress, not for the first time and not the first Indian to do so either. But this address is a landmark in several ways for India and US relations, being seen as a tipping point or a turning point for US-India relations, and also extremely reflective of how US looks at India. Vishnu Shom breaks this down for us.
It's a rare honor reserved for some of America's closest friends. Prime Minister Modi's visit to the US is no ordinary working visit. It's a state visit, which means the US rolls out all the bells and whistles in a show of respect. Though there are variations to the ceremony attached with such visits, they usually include a flight line guard of honor on arrival in the US, a ceremonial welcome at the White House, a state dinner at the White House hosted by the US President. In Prime Minister Modi's case, those attending will include US leaders across political lines, and an invitation to stay at Blair House, the official guest house of the US President on Pennsylvania Avenue.
Let our two great nations realize all the triumphs and achievements that await us. Cheers.
The last Prime Minister to get this honor was Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, who was honored with a personal dinner invite from President Barack Obama and Michelle Obama at the White House in 2009. Though the US State Department lists Prime Minister Indira Gandhi's visit to the US in 1982 as an official and not as a state visit, she was also honored with a gun salute and state dinner in a grand ceremony. Other Indian leaders to have been invited personally by a US president include President Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, who visited in June 1963 as a guest of President John F. Kennedy. The first Indian Prime Minister invited as a guest of a US President was Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, who was a guest of President Truman, visiting New York, Chicago, Knoxville, and San Francisco in addition to Washington. This menu shows what Prime Minister Nehru was served at the White House: roast turkey and pan filet of sole.
The Prime Minister of the Republic of India.
Where Prime Minister Modi is unique is being invited not once, but twice to speak before a joint session of US Congress.
The constraints of the past are behind us, and foundations of the future are firmly in place.
Perhaps the biggest sign that India is the hottest ticket in America's diplomatic calendar. Vishnu Shom for NDTV.
And NDTV will be bringing you all the detailed coverage from whatever is happening in the United States over the next 3 days. And my colleague Maha Siddiqui is in New York, is following all of this extremely closely. Maha, moments from now, Prime Minister Modi will be landing in New York, of course, being seen as a turning point or a massive landmark in India-US bilateral relations. But what's the sense you're getting right now? What's the flavor that you're seeing around you, Maha?
Well, around us, because we are standing at the hotel where the Prime Minister is going to stay, that's right behind us over there. If my camera person can just pan and he'll just show you around. The security has now been tightened over here because the Prime Minister will land at the JFK airport in about 10 to 15 minutes from now. The scheduled time is 10:25 p.m. Indian Standard Time, which is about 12:55 p.m. here in New York. The diaspora, some of the people have already gathered here to welcome the Prime Minister. But again, because the security is tight there, they've already done one security sweep. They have asked all the people to go across the road now, which includes the media as well as some members of the diaspora who are here to welcome the Prime Minister. So the mood around the hotel at the moment, of course, because of the people who are gathered here, is one of a welcome to the Prime Minister that will be according to him first by the Indian community here. But the Prime Minister's schedule from here on, after the next 2 hours, once he lands and then reaches the hotel, will be once again hitting the ground running immediately. He will be meeting about 24 people, which will include industry leaders, CEOs, health sector experts, Nobel laureates, as well as musicians, artists, academicians, all sorts of people, and not just of the Indian origin, but also otherwise. For instance, he'll be meeting Tesla founder Elon Musk as well. Apart from that, he will be meeting astrophysicist Mr. Tyson as well. So a huge number of people that he's going to engage with. Let me put this into perspective, and especially the meeting with the CEOs, with scientists specifically. This is because India and the US are looking at forging closer ties in the tech sector. And last year, during Prime Minister Modi and President Biden's meeting on the sidelines of the Quad Summit, the two had announced ISET, which is the initiative on critical and emerging technologies, under which it is the industry on both sides that has to come together to take this forward. So basically what is happening at the moment is that the industry leaders are being met with to figure out what exactly is it that is required for them to be able to forge these closer ties, because these can be done through the industry, not only via government-to-government contact. We are just learning that the Prime Minister's flight has in fact landed at the John F. Kennedy Airport. From there, it will take the PM about 45 minutes to 1 hour. The airport is not close to the spot to reach here at the hotel. Once he is here at the hotel, I pointed out that he'll be meeting those 24 people. Today's slot has been reserved for meetings with CEOs, because tomorrow morning he starts off with the International Yoga Day event, and immediately after the International Yoga Day event, which is in the early morning hours between 8 to 9 p.m., he'll be leaving for Washington, D.C., which is going to be the place for the formal state visit, which will have the bilateral meeting on the 22nd, followed by his address to the U.S. Congress, followed by the dinner, the state dinner thrown by President Biden.
Right, Maha. Long day for you, of course, ahead, and some very important meetings also that are lined up. We'll give you lots more that is lined up, but first, time for a short break.
23 years of the big fight. This show is not just an ordinary debate show, but it is a responsibility in service of our viewers.
NDTV for news you can trust. No sensationalism, no ugly debates, no agenda. We strive to be transparent and unbiased in our reporting so you can get news that you can rely on.
In a deeply polarized world, where space for disagreement is shrinking, where take it or leave it defines discourse, we take a step back. A debate has many facets, perhaps no one right answer. Left, right and center, conversations that get to the core of the debate. Left, right and center with me, Vishnu Shom, 9 p.m. on NDTV 24/7.
Gadgets 360 is here to help you with all your tech needs.
Gadget 360, Gadget Love.
Gadgets 360, Gadgets Love.
You too can get some gadget love with buying guides, expert reviews, and all the latest news on Gadgets 360.
It's undeniable. We're facing the crisis of the generation, climate change. And it's happening. Not in some far-off distant land or some millions of years away. It's happening now. And it affects everything we know and love. Information around climate change can often feel too distant, too jargony, too scary, too anxiety-filled, too technical, or too political. I'm here to change that. The Climate Explainers, part of NDTV's 6-month-long campaign, building a blueprint for climate action. The climate clock is ticking, but we're just in time.
Facts are the foundation of a news story, but it's the views that shape these stories. Because when you hear views from all sides, you get the complete picture.
23 years of the big fight. This show is not just an ordinary debate show, but it is a responsibility in service of our viewers.
NDTV for news you can trust. No sensationalism, no ugly debates, no agenda. We strive to be transparent and unbiased in our reporting so you can get news that you can rely on.
In a deeply polarized world, where space for disagreement is shrinking, where take it or leave it defines discourse, we take a step back. A debate has many facets.
Welcome back. And Prime Minister Modi has arrived at New York. His flight has landed at New York. In fact, it's a matter of time where we may even get the visuals of him leaving the airport. I'm also being joined by my colleague Maha Siddiqui, who has been giving us all the details from the ground, from whatever is happening in US, and will continue to do so for the next 3 days. Maha, so Prime Minister Modi has landed at New York. You were mentioning around 45 minutes before he arrives or reaches the hotel where you are standing. Of course, a lot at stake also, Maha, because if you look at the geopolitical conditions or the environment in which this meeting is happening, there's a war going on that many in our generation would have never thought, and it's just an ongoing war. The repercussions are so much in terms of allies that may be close to US or to India. A lot really at stake even as this meeting does happen.
Well, that's absolutely right. And in fact, that question was asked to by me to some of the sources as to whether the issue of Ukraine might come up, even though India and the US has in fact said that it has a better understanding of India's position vis-a-vis vis-a-vis Russia, sorry. But will that matter come up again? Will the US continue to push India a little more as far as Russia is concerned? From what we understand is that as far as India is concerned, it's not in its talking points. However, it could probably be on the talking points of the US side, and one cannot definitely rule out that possibility. So as far as what my sources have told me is that India's reply is going to be the standard position that India has taken over the last 1 year. And that is that as far as the war is concerned, Prime Minister has already articulated himself to Vladimir Putin, the Russian president himself, that this is not an era of war, and that India certainly wants to play a more constructive role in being able to make any contribution in stopping this war. India's position as far as the war is concerned is very clear. As far as its relationship with Russia is concerned is also very clear, that Russia has been an old friend of India, an old ally, and that relationship will continue while India has already raised the issue of the war at the highest level with the Russian side. So yes, this is a very critical time at which this meeting is happening, and not just in view of Russia, but also, Sneha, the other aspect of China, the common threat of China, as I would put it, for both India and the US, especially in the Indo-Pacific. And that is why you see constantly the reference to the Indo-Pacific coming up in any statement by the Indian or the American side. Even as far as this meeting is concerned, when it was in fact announced by the White House that President Biden is inviting Prime Minister Modi for the state visit, there was a reference to Indo-Pacific, which clearly means that the two sides are looking at closer ties, forging better ties with an eye on China, even though they don't say it explicitly. And this is both in the sector of, for instance, defense, to better collaboration, as I was pointing out, even in the tech sector. After all, many believe under the space sector as well, that the modern warfare will be fought in space. Space has satellites, communication linkages, and modern warfare is about how you manage communication. If communication links are broken at a critical time, then an entire conflict can go from one side to another. That is the reason that India and the US are looking at further collaboration even in the space sector, where they are looking at ways and means to make it more secure, safe, and apart from that, technology cooperation as far as semiconductors are concerned is certainly going to be extremely important for both sides. The initiative has already been announced, one such initiative earlier this year. closer ties on making the supply chain of semiconductors resilient is critical. Now, why? Let's try and understand that as well. What are semiconductors? These are nothing but small chips. That technology is used in the small chips that are used in almost everything around us, from household electronic goods to also our banking ATMs, cars, and technology around us and beyond us, and therefore it is critical that the supply chain remains resilient. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we had seen how the supply chain got disrupted, creating hurdles for the automobile sector. They are used in GPS navigation and a lot of other things in car manufacturing. Therefore, the two sides coming together for more packaging and manufacture of semiconductors is going to be one very important aspect. We are likely to see some big announcement related to that sector as well probably on the 22nd of June. So yes, in terms of geopolitics, as you asked, Sneha, both Russia and China become important from different perspectives. From the American side, maybe Russia; from both the American and the Indian side, China.
Right. In fact, Maha, just before we move on to other elements that we are bringing you from US, what's interesting also is the state dinner that is going to be witnessed by Prime Minister Modi. Prime Minister Modi, of course, going to be part of that. And it's his first visit to US, or the first state visit to US, but not really his first visit, Maha. How is US preparing for this state meet?
Well, absolutely. This is certainly not his first visit to the United States since he took over as Prime Minister. Yes, Neha, the previous visits were categorized as working visits or simply a bilateral visit. A state visit, as we just ran that package, how it is different from any other visit is clear. He will be getting a guard of honor, a 19-gun salute. That is what we know as far as a state visit is concerned. A state dinner is an integral part of a state visit, and the dinner will be hosted at the White House in their lawns by President Joe Biden. We are expecting that the White House has invited about 250 people roughly for that state dinner. This will include a fairly decent amount of chunk of Indian Americans. Now remember, the Indian American community is very vital, both from the Indian perspective as well from the American perspective. After all, the Silicon Valley, the tech hub of America, is powered by Indians leading from the front. And this diaspora also creates a connect between India and America. So this a lot of Indian Americans are expected to be present at that state dinner. Typically what happens in a state dinner is when the guest arrives, which in this case will be Prime Minister Modi, he will be introduced to all those guests who are invited, after which a state dinner, as I understand, can last really long. So it will start at 6:30, that is the norm. State dinner starts at 6:30. As we have an example, when the South Korean president was here, he was only the second leader to have been invited for a state visit by President Joe Biden. The dinner went on up till 1 a.m. in the morning. So that's how long a state dinner can go on. Of course, that state dinner became also, in some sense, clips became viral because the South Korean president sung American Pie at the state dinner. But for President, although this comes in the 9th year tenure of the Prime Minister Modi, the state dinner being thrown from President Biden's perspective in his 3 years is only the third. The other one, as I said, the South Korean president, which has just happened, and before that, the French President Emmanuel Macron, who was also invited by President Biden for a state dinner.
Right, Maha. Thank you for those details. Maha Siddiqui reporting from New York, and she will be covering all the 3 days that Prime Minister Modi is going to be in US. And from the first International Yoga Day in 2015 to now, that's 2023, yoga not only continues to be popular with countries across the world, but is also turning to be a crucial diplomacy tool for India, what many are now even terming as yoga diplomacy. Here is a brief glimpse of how this journey seems to have unfolded.
Yoga unites. It unites body and mind, humanity and nature, and millions of people across the globe for whom it is a source of strength, harmony and peace. In a dangerous and divided world, the benefits of this ancient practice are particularly precious.
This message of unity of body and mind has been practiced across the world for decades. But yoga truly went global in 2015. After Prime Minister Narendra Modi's proposal to celebrate 21st June as the International Day of Yoga was adopted unanimously by 175 nations.
जब हम क्लाइमेट चेंज की बात करते हैं, हम होलिस्टिक हेल्थ केयर की बात करते हैं, हम प्रकृति के साथ जुड़ने की बात करते हैं, हम जब बैक टू बेसिक की बात करते हैं, तब मैं उस विषय पर आज विशेष रूप से आपसे एक बात कहना चाहता हूं। योग हमारी पुरातन पारंपरिक अमूल्य देन है। योग केवल व्यायाम भर न होकर अपने आप से तथा विश्व व प्रकृति के साथ तादात्म्य को प्राप्त करने का माध्यम है। यह हमारी जीवन शैली में परिवर्तन लाकर तथा हम में जागरूकता उत्पन्न करके जलवायु परिवर्तन से लड़ने में सहायक हो सकता है। आइए हम एक अंतर्राष्ट्रीय योग दिवस को आरंभ करने की दिशा में कार्य करें।
Since then, world over, 21st June sees yoga enthusiasts collectively perform asanas across multiple time zones.
कि योग की जो तस्वीरें कुछ वर्ष पहले केवल घरों में आध्यात्मिक केंद्रों में दिखती थी, वो आज विश्व के कोने-कोने से आ रही है। ये तस्वीरें आत्मिक बोध के विस्तार की तस्वीरें हैं। योग अब एक वैश्विक पर्व बन गया है। योग किसी व्यक्ति मात्र के लिए नहीं, संपूर्ण मानवता के लिए है।
In line with India's push for one earth, one family, one future, also the motto of India's G20 presidency, this year's International Day of Yoga theme is Yoga for Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. And to gauge its growing popularity, an international market research agency pegged the yoga market size at nearly $37,500 million in 2019. And it is projected to reach a whopping $66,226 million by the year 2027. But what makes this growth exceptional is the penetration of yoga. From homes to schools to corporate offices and yoga studios, everyone is hitting the yoga mat to beat the stress and find a balanced and healthy way of life. From yoga as a fad to yoga as a global way of life, this perhaps is India's biggest contribution to the world today. Bureau Report, NDTV.
And as Prime Minister Modi's US visit has begun and he has arrived at New York, I'm also being joined by a panel here to break down on how crucial really is this visit, not only for India, but also the United States. I'm being joined by Nicole Berner-Schmitz, who's a former National Political Director for NARAL Democratic Strategist. Thank you very much for joining us. Also, Ajay Jain Putoria, who's an Indian-American community leader. Thank you for joining us. We'll go to both of them and get their views on this particularly, but first a short break.
Class on. Match off. Meeting on.
Gadgets 360 is here to help you with all your tech needs.
Gadget 360, Gadget Love.
Gadgets 360, Gadgets Love.
You too can get some gadget love with buying guides, expert reviews, and all the latest news on Gadgets 360.
It's undeniable. We're facing the crisis of the generation, climate change, and it's happening not in some far off distant land or some millions of years away. It's happening now. And it affects everything we know and...
All right, these are the visuals of Prime Minister Modi arriving in New York, his flight landing, and this marks the beginning of his 3-day visit to the United States, where a series of meetings are being held. Of course, Prime Minister Modi, this is his first state visit to the United States.
Facts are the foundation of a news story, but it's the views that shape these stories. Because when you hear views from all sides, you get the complete picture.
23 years of the big fight. This show is not just an ordinary debate show.
Joe Biden, the US President, Prime Minister Modi is just the third. So there are a series of meetings which, of course, are expected over the next few days. But he will kickstart his day, of course, just minutes after reaching the hotel, where he is also going to be received by the Indian diaspora. He is going to be meeting key leaders from different arenas, whether it is Elon Musk of Tesla, also the Twitter owner now, as well as other leaders, including Grammy Award winner and singers as well. And I'm also being joined by Maha Siddiqui right now. Maha, so these initial visuals of Prime Minister Modi landing at New York, and you've of course been talking about how important and relevant this whole visit has been. But Maha, what are we expecting at the hotel? You know, you were mentioning it's around a 45 minutes travel from the airport to the hotel. What are we expecting at the hotel particularly, Maha?
So if I can just show you a glimpse of some of the people behind us, they are from the Indian community, and these people have already arrived here right across the hotel. They're already in some sense having their own little celebration to welcome the Prime Minister over here. So they are largely going to be the the Indian diaspora that is present here at the moment to welcome the Prime Minister. Now the Prime Minister, of course, will be immediately landing here. There is a lot of security. These people, of course, will not be allowed to go anywhere close to him at the moment. And as far as the security is concerned, I'll just get my camera person to pan and show you this entire stretch outside the New York Palace Hotel, where the Prime Minister will be staying, has been cordoned off. So even we've been cordoned off to one part of the street on the other side of the hotel. The entire stretch on the front of the hotel, even on the back, has been cordoned off. The security sweep for this entire stretch has already been done. The security personnel have been here since about 8:39 in the morning. That is the time that all these arrangements have been made. So the Prime Minister will be coming and immediately going inside the hotel, after which in the next few hours after his arrival, he will start meeting those people that you were talking about, 24 people in all who he will be meeting in New York, ranging from industry leaders, CEOs, which includes somebody like Elon Musk, the founder of Tesla, the owner of Twitter. Apart from that, he'll be meeting scientists, academicians, artists, and such people and many other such people who really have made a mark in the American society. This includes some Indian Americans as well, like Chandrika Tandon. Now, he'll also be meeting apart from the industry leaders, investors as well. So all this with an eye on better, first of all, business ties between the two countries. America is India's largest trading partner, but often on we see issues with regards to trade coming up between the two sides. During President Trump's tenure, there were a lot of such issues that cropped up, especially on the issue of tariffs, which President Trump used to constantly keep reiterating. Now, as far as trade is concerned, those conversations happen, but outside the realm of any such big meeting. Trade is a very important component of the bilateral ties between India and the United States. So that is why we are seeing a thrust on the industry and CEOs. But not just that. look at the kind of people that the Prime Minister is going to be meeting here. Tesla, which is a company we all know, which talks about futuristic travel modes as well. He's meeting an astrophysicist as well. All that with a view on better tech cooperation between the two countries as well, India and the United States, because the tech partnership is going to drive these ties in the future. And the India and the United States are already working on what they call the Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technologies, under which elements like semiconductors, artificial intelligence, quantum, a lot of such issues are being discussed and talked about. Even space comes under that ISET as well. And these are all futuristic with an aim to, really give competition to, as well as China, for instance, which is perhaps a little ahead of India as far as space and AI is concerned. So all these are very important aspects, and they will be dealt with by the Prime Minister on the first day of his visit. A bit of that will be dealt with on the first day of his visit here in New York as he meets these 24 people.
Right, Maha. Thank you for all of those details. And as we mentioned and introduced our panelist before we took a break, we have Nicole Brenner with us, as well as Ajay Jain Bhutoria. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us. But first to you, Nicole Brenner-Schmitz. How do you really look at this visit by Prime Minister Modi and the kind of invite that has been extended by US? Definitely a turning point in US-India bilateral relations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is an invitation that is, includes an official state visit, which is a tremendous move forward, and I think a signal of all the positive conversations that the U.S. is looking for. But I think not to be underestimated is the fact that people in both the Democratic and Republican parties are excited to hear the Prime Minister's address to Congress and to have this conversation and move forward on a lot of these different aspects. So to have a bipartisan consensus in Washington is not the most usual thing. So it's exciting that they're going to move forward and certainly, hopefully, have some productive conversations about a whole swath of issues.
Right. Let me also get the first comments from Ajay Jain Bhutoria. We are already getting visuals of celebrations outside the hotel. Of course, a lot of them will not be able to meet the Prime Minister, but I believe you have been invited to one such dinner. What is the Indian community really expecting?
So this is a very historic visit, and the whole community is very excited. And President Biden and Secretary Blinken and the whole administration has been working towards strengthening U.S.-India relationships. And this visit is a landmark and will take the U.S.-India relationship to the next level. Whether there will be discussions around focusing on technology transfer as well as strengthening the U.S.-India defense relationship, where opportunities of U.S. would be looking at India to less reliance on Russian weapons and opportunity to use the latest technology from U.S. defense weapons. There will be opportunity to increase the trade between U.S. and India. The current trade is around $100 billion, and the opportunity is to grow to $500 billion in next 10 years. So there will be discussions around shaping that vision. There will be discussions around bringing manufacturing into India around semiconductors and health-related items. And of course, the whole Indian diaspora is excited by the visit of the Prime Minister. There have been celebration last 2 days, almost across 20 cities, from New York to San Francisco to Chicago, where the diaspora gathered and had parades and celebrations. And there will be more excitement, around 4,000 to 5,000 people in the South Lawn. And I look forward to seeing the Prime Minister at the state lunch hosted by the Vice President.
Right. In fact, Nicole Brenner, one of the major challenges really for this meet that would be taking place is to be able to bring in a cohesion or an understanding with respect to a very challenging geopolitical environment amid which this meeting is happening. And US and India have made their stands on these geopolitical challenges very, very clear. So both of them meeting and talking on very critical issues. Of course, they will be focusing on their bilateral relations, but it won't be void of all that's happening internationally.
Yeah, I mean, certainly as they discuss their bilateral relations, it affects the relationships with countries like Russia and like China as our two countries talk about their priorities. And as we continue to grow our work together, particularly in the defense industry, what effect that has with how we deal with countries like China and Russia, which are important. I think we have a lot of line up on our concerns about China, and our two countries can have a lot of agreement about where to go forward with that. And I think the U.S. is very interested in working with India even more so that it's not quite as focused and dependent on Russia. And these are all the parts of the chessboard that go on. But we're coming into these conversations with a positiveness, a celebration, really, of Indian culture.
Nicole, let me interrupt you at this point. These are the visuals that are on your screen of Prime Minister Modi having exited his aircraft, and he's being received at the airport by dignitaries. An important moment ahead of the three-day visit, as this visit actually has begun as Prime Minister Modi has landed. Now, there are a series of meetings that are expected to happen in minutes from now. It would be around 45 minutes to an hour before he does reach the hotel where he will be, and eventually will be also meeting leaders from different segments, whether it be technology, scientists, or even those from the music and music world as well. So he'll be meeting different leaders, as the Indian leaders have called them, Indian officials have called them thought leaders, and that also being very important in terms of how India is looking to partner with the US in much deeper terms. We must remember some very strong defense as well as tech sector agreements are likely. There's also been a background to all of this, as the ISEC Pact was signed, and there was this move to deepen the defense and tech partnerships. Now, that is going to be really the basis or the background to which this meeting will be happening. And let's return to our guests at this point. So let me go over to Ajay Jain Bhutoria. Ajay, you're seeing these visuals of Prime Minister exit his aircraft. We've also seen visuals already of celebrations outside the hotel where he's expected in minutes from now, particularly for the Indian community, as it were. These defense and tech partnerships are going to mean a lot for both the communities from the US as well as India. But what really is the immediate interest that the Indian community is looking at? Is it also the fact that they have finally, you know, it's such a warm welcome, it's such a big invite that Prime Minister Modi has received from the Biden administration?
So, yeah, I mean, that's a great thing. I mean, if you look at almost around 4.5 to 5 million Indian Americans in US, they have been contributing into the economy, into their leaders in tech industry, leaders in medical and in the political world, and they are all there. With the Prime Minister visit and with such significant importance given by this administration to this US-India relationship, this also, enhances the profile of the Indo-American community as a whole in the country, and shares that both the countries are standing together with close allies. As much as India needs US needs India to counterbalance China in the Indo-Pacific region. So this brings a much strength in the bilateral relationship, both people to people as well, between US and India, and that's going to great moment of pride for the entire Indian American community here. The community is looking forward to celebrate, and I know thousands of people are going to be in DC, arriving in DC starting today. I mean,
Nicole, as this visit begins, as the meetings are scheduled, what is the big message that you're looking at from the US as well as India?
Well, I think we're looking at what are the positive effects and what are the things that we can move forward on. This visit is very much about looking at where we have agreement, what we think we can work together on, and not focusing on some of the differences that exist, but really that we're both looking at how to increase our trade, how to rely on the technology, maybe some discussions about climate. I think it's a good chance for the Biden administration to really show and flex its international credentials. You have to remember, President Biden, when he was in the Senate, was chair and ranking member of the Foreign Affairs Committee. This is what he really loves to work on. But when he took over in 2020, really had to drill down and focus on domestic issues that America was facing. So I think this is a good opportunity for the administration to show that the Democrats and their party are just as focused on international security and defense and this kind of going forward.
Right. And Mr. Ajay, while the world will be looking at this bilateral meeting very carefully, also very interesting would be how yoga is going to be the center of a lot that would happen over the next 24 hours at least. From what from the journey that began in 2015 with the International Yoga Day being declared to today, where Prime Minister Modi is also going to be part of the Yoga Day celebrations. He's going to be even performing yoga, as it were. Even terms like yoga diplomacy being coined for India. How is the Indian diaspora looking at this? Do you perform yoga?
Yes, I do perform yoga, and yoga has become integral part of the Western world, integral part of the American community in general. I mean, thank you for India to leading the way and bringing the yoga into this world. And health and fitness is one of the priority of this administration. So I'm hoping to see next Yoga Day being celebrated in the White House lawns. I hope that will be happening soon. And so this bringing the yoga, Prime Minister Modi doing yoga celebration through tomorrow through the United Nations sends a very strong message to the world that we are also interested in the fitness and health of the world, and spiritual fitness and mental, spiritual and body fitness. At the same time, India is also emerging as a global leader, as a democratic global leader, which will be leading in and showing its strength in the Indo-Pacific region and collaborating. So this is, we're looking forward to more discussions during the next 3 days, I mean.
Right. In fact, Nicole, it's not just about health and fitness alone. It's also going to be very interesting to see a very political message, even though it's not intended, but the political influence through all of this is also very, very discreet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, the population of Indian Americans is growing more and more. We're also seeing more and more Indian Americans get elected to their state legislatures, their city councils, to Congress. And we're seeing their political power and their message grow through, whether it's political action committees or their votes or what the community is leaning into. So we're seeing a lot of that growth happening, and it looks to, even expand even further in the next few years.
Nicole, how is
and
US?
I want to add on to the point.
Go ahead, Ajay.
I want to add on to the point which says in the last general election, in the 2020 election, the Indo-Americans, was 5 million Indo-Americans votes played the major, part to the victory of this administration. They were in the major states like Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Georgia, where these votes were the crucial votes which defined the margin of the victory. And as Nicole said, more and more, we now have almost 5 or 6 members of Congress who are members of Indian origin and who will be welcoming. They call themselves as Samosa Congress. Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy, Congressman Khanna, Congressman Pramila Jayapal, Amy Bera, and the newly elected Congressman, I'm just blanking out his name right now. So it's a matter of pride, and we have across, if I look at San Francisco, Silicon Valley, across multiple cities, we have mayors and council members who are Indian origin, and more young Indian Americans who are born here are running for Congress. Every day there's a new young Indian American announcing they want to run and they be part of this political process.
Right. That's an interesting point that you have brought in, Mr. Ajay. Nicole, how are the ordinary citizens in US, you know, not the Indian American, but how are the ordinary US citizens looking at all of this?
Well, I think they're just starting to focus and realize that this is happening. It's starting to get coverage in our mainstream media as he arrives in New York today. So, but as any state dinner gets the interest of people, but I think that it's something that the American people, they're aware of, right? Like you were talking about the yoga and how it's really integrated itself into everyday American life. And we're seeing that with more and more traditions and those cultures. And so I think that the American public is always excited when they see us working with other countries to move forward on bilateral agreements.
Right, and these are the visuals of Prime Minister Modi being welcomed at the airport as he arrived in New York a couple of minutes ago, almost half an hour ago. And he's right now being welcomed at the airport. He's not started his trip or his road trip to the hotel, as it were, which is around 45 minutes from the airport. So you already have visuals coming in from the airport. Prime Minister Modi being welcomed by a very excited and interested Indian diaspora. Maha Siddiqui joins us right now. Maha, Prime Minister Modi still at the airport and being welcomed with much excitement.
Well, of course, as we know that this is an important visit. It's the first state visit of the Prime Minister to the US. The earlier visits were all categorized as working visits, bilateral visits, but a state visit accords the person a bigger honor. There'll be a guard of honor, there'll be a state dinner thrown for the Prime Minister. In that sense, this visit, that is why this visit is being keenly watched for not just in terms of the outcomes or takeaways, but also a lot in terms of symbolism as well, Sneha. As far as the takeaways are concerned, even those are likely to be quite big. For instance, much is being talked about the takeaways in the defense sector. So the two big deals we are looking at probably is one of the joint production of GE jet engines that will be used for HAL's latest version of the light combat aircraft. Now this, if this announcement comes through, is going to be extremely huge because this is joint production of a technology that is American. Whether this will pave the way for technology transfer is an important aspect that is being looked at because India is stressing on Make in India, and for which it is important that there is not just joint production but also a technology transfer, which is critical for India being a large importer of defense equipment. Another important deal that is more in terms of America, which will be the buyer in this case, which will be the seller, sorry, in this case, and for India, which will be the buyer, is important in the sense of what we are seeing is bolstering India's security equipment apparatus, whatever you may call it, that of the drones that India will buy from America. So we are expecting that to happen as well. And technological partnership that I pointed out, which is certainly critical in view of China and the Indo-Pacific, its growing aggression. Also, just not relying on China and Taiwan alone for semiconductors, which is a critical component of many electronic items and powers even bigger things like, for instance, bank ATMs, cars. And we've seen the fallout of the supply chain disruption of semiconductors during the COVID-19 pandemic on the automobile industry specifically. So these are some of the critical, important aspects, and that is why we are seeing a great thrust on this visit of the Prime Minister, very critical and important from both India and America's perspective. Sneha.
Right. Maha, in fact, while you were mentioning about Indo-Pacific region and about how this meeting is going to be very critical with what we're expecting in terms of China and about focus on semiconductors being produced in India as well, manufactured in India as well. Maha, this whole meeting between US and India, also is extremely important for the Indian diaspora, as it were. You can see from the, from at least the sense that we are getting sitting here, from all the visuals that are emerging, the excitement which has been around. It's also not only about what the two countries are really looking in terms of the bilaterals, but also in terms of what people would be expecting for the next several years.
Well, certainly the diaspora also shows enthusiasm because there is certainly excitement when the Prime Minister of a country that your origins lie in is visiting a country. So that is why, and especially a section of the Indian diaspora that ardently follows the Prime Minister, for them it is of huge interest, and that is why we are seeing a group having gathered here outside his hotel as well. Now, of course, even they know that they might not be able to meet the Prime Minister, so to speak, because of the security arrangements, but this group has nonetheless come here. They are enthusiastic, waving the Indian as well as American flag. That enthusiasm aside, diaspora is a critical component of soft diplomacy as well between any two countries, and we have seen how leveraging that helps countries build better ties with another country. So the diaspora becomes critical in that sense. Also, the Indian diaspora, particularly in America, is very well regarded because of the kind of contribution that it has made to the American society. After all, the Silicon Valley, the tech hub of America, is pretty much powered by people of Indian origin. Some of the CEOs of some of the top tech companies are Indians. So in that context, the diaspora becomes important. The engagement with diaspora, keeping them as a bridge, and I would cite the example of the United Kingdom here. They refer to the diaspora and to the movement of people as a living bridge. So clearly, that can be that reference can be used anywhere, and that reference can perhaps even be used between India and America. This is a bridge that builds ties between the two countries. The Prime Minister will separately be meeting the diaspora as well in Washington, D.C. The event will not be at the scale of what we've seen in the past, for instance, Howdy Modi, or when he visited New York for the first time after he became the Prime Minister. The capacity, though, is going to be slightly smaller there, 800 to 1,000, but we are expecting the diaspora to come at the Reagan Center, Ronald Reagan Center in Washington, D.C. To hear the Prime Minister speak. That diaspora event will take place just before the Prime Minister leaves from America for Egypt.
Right, Maha Siddiqui, thank you for those details. Prime Minister Modi being welcomed at New York airport. You can see the Indian flags being held by the Indian diaspora who have gathered at the airport to welcome Prime Minister Modi, his first state visit to the United States, and also just ahead of that very interesting state dinner also that is going to be very, very keenly watched. You also have the celebration shots outside the hotel where Prime Minister Modi is shortly expected, and he'll also be meeting a series of leaders, including Elon Musk and several others from the science and music world. We'll keep bringing you all the details, but for now it's time for a short break.
Order! NDTV for news you can trust. No sensationalism, no ugly debates, no agenda. We strive to be transparent and unbiased in our reporting so you can get news that you can rely on.
In a deeply polarized world, where space for disagreement is shrinking, where take it or leave it defines discourse, we take a step back. A debate has many facets, perhaps no one right answer. Left, right and center, conversations that get to the core of the debate. Left, right and center with me, Vishnu Shom, 9 p.m. on NDTV 24/7.
Hello, I'm I'm Sneha Koshi and we are bringing you all the details of Prime Minister Modi's visit to the United States. He has been welcomed at the New York airport, the first state visit of Prime Minister Modi that is being seen as a major turning point for the India-US bilateral relations, with deeper cooperation in defense industry and sharing high technology in sharp focus. A series of meetings are going to be held. The celebrations already happening at the airport as well as outside the hotel, where Prime Minister Modi is expected shortly and will then be meeting industry leaders from various segments. We'll keep bringing you all the details. I'm being joined by my colleague Maha Siddiqui right now. We'll try and get Maha back. There seems to be some problem with the connection. However, as I have been mentioning to you, here are the visuals on your screen. Prime Minister Modi being welcomed at the New York airport. You see the Indian flags being held by the Indian diaspora. A lot of excitement amid the Indian diaspora. Of course, a lot is expected in this state visit of Prime Minister Modi, a first state visit of Prime Minister Modi. In fact, under President Joe Biden, there have been only 3 state visits of international leaders, and Prime Minister Modi's is just one of those 3. So a lot of importance being paid to what is being seen as the bilateral relations of US and US as well as India. But it's not just about the bilateral ties. It's also about how the world will be looking at the 2 leaders meet and what really emerges out of this 3-day visit of Prime Minister Modi to India. I'm also being joined right now by Ajay Jain Bhutoria, who's an Indian American community leader. Ajay, there's already visuals of celebrations that we can see, so celebrations happening outside the hotel. Now, what are we expecting over the next few hours? One being Prime Minister Modi meeting leaders from different segments, and number 2, in terms of Prime Minister Modi also performing yoga at UN for the International Yoga Day. This whole journey marking a huge importance for India as well as the Indian diaspora. Ajay, your Zoom seems to have been on mute. Can you unmute that?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a very historic trip, and if we will look back after 5 years on this trip will be redefining the India-US relationship, taking it into next orbit, strengthening it. And this trip is also important from regional and global issues. The visit will include discussions on regional and global issues of mutual concern, both for India and US, such as stability in the Indo-Pacific region, countering and balancing China in the Indo-Pacific region, counterterrorism efforts, and cooperation in multilateral forums like the United Nations. It is important for India to get into the Security Council in the United Nations, and I think India will be seeking US support around that. And then the commitment of both countries to address global challenges around climate change as well as economic growth. So towards economic growth, the countries would be looking towards the manufacturing opportunities in India. And it is in India's interest to become a semiconductor manufacturing hub when US is trying to shift away from its dependency on Taiwan as the key supplier of the semiconductor, where President Biden had invested a huge amount through the CHIPS Act for bringing manufacturing in US. It is also important to look at other partners beyond China and Taiwan, and India with a huge amount of skilled workforce as well as all the avenues which could support this manufacturing in India. India could play a great role, and that I think that should be on Prime Minister Modi's agenda to bring manufacturing around that into India. So we will be seeing more discussions around these happening in the next 3 days.
Ajay, while India, of course, is looking at deepening its bilateral ties, particularly in defense and tech sector, that has been the focus for India and US over the last several months, as it were. the Indian diaspora are people who have been at the forefront of both of these sectors, and particularly in the tech sector, the Silicon Valley and otherwise, the Indian diaspora there have been main contributors to the US. So how is the Indian diaspora particularly looking at the agreements that may be forged between US and India in the tech sector, the deepening of ties? What do they really stand to benefit? Could you give us the top three?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The Indian diaspora, whether you look at from Sundar Pichai to any other leading CEOs of all the leading companies out here in US, they are all interested in expanding their footprints in India and expanding their presence in India in terms of already they have their presence and expanding their presence. So that will be one side where they will be looking forward to discussing with the Prime Minister Modi to have, expanding their businesses in India and growing that. That's on the one side. The other side is that the education, there are almost over 200,000 students who come to US and they go through the immigration process, H1 and backlog and green card issues. So I think there will be, some of the diaspora will be looking that the Prime Minister Modi brings up the issues of immigration and green card backlogs to this administration. And overall strengthening of US-India relationship also brings, a matter of pride between people-to-people relationship between US and India. So I think the diaspora is looking forward to this visit.
Right. It's going to be also interesting, Ajay, to see what emerges out of this meeting. But how different, just for the ordinary Indian diaspora, they're a very strong segment of the US population. Why do you see Prime Minister Modi's visit to US very different from what would have been earlier Indian leaders who would have visited US, just from a very ordinary citizens' perspective who have been contributing very strongly to the US economy?
Prime Minister Modi is, I think, if I don't say the most popular leader in the world, I can say one of the most popular leader in the world. And for him coming to United States, it's a matter of pride for every Indo-American living here when they see their prime minister, when the country is growing so fast, is becoming a leader in the world in every sector. It brings a joy and pride within the people of Indian origin to see the prime minister coming and being welcomed in the White House tomorrow. There will be like 4,000 people, 4,000 to 5,000 Indo-Americans in the South alone. And so it also gives them opportunity for them to advocate with their member of Congress, with their members of the Senate, to tell about the role of India and how India could be a strong ally and partner for US. So there are hundreds and thousands of people who now recently there are organizations like FIDS and others who have been advocating and going into the Capitol and on increasing India-US relationship, increasing the relationship between defense sector, being able to remove the CAATSA law and supply defense weapons to India, including the fighter jets, which India definitely needs in order to balance with China. There are certain regulations which are prohibiting those transfer. So once the people of US play a major role in helping understand their member of Congress and Senate, why it is important to have a stronger relationship with India, how India and US could be strong allies in the new world, emerging new global geopolitical world. And that is where the common people are very happy. And of course, they would love to see Prime Minister Modi. So, yeah.
Right. Thank you, Ajay, for joining us. But moving away from just the Indian diaspora, let's also look at how US is looking at Prime Minister Modi's visit.
India is a key and important partner, not just in the Indo-Pacific, but globally for the United States. In fact, it's one of the most defining bilateral relationships in the world now. And if you just look ahead, look at where things are going, not just in that region, but elsewhere, I think it's safe to say that it's going to be one of the most defining and important bilateral relationships well into the future. All I can tell you is that in President Biden's mind, India is not a second-tier anything. This visit will affirm the deep and close partnership between the United States and India and the warm bonds of family and friendship that link Americans and Indians together. The visit will strengthen our two countries' shared commitment to a free, open, prosperous, and secure Indo-Pacific, and our shared resolve to elevate our strategic technology partnership, including in defense, clean energy, and space. The leaders will discuss ways to further expand our educational exchanges and people-to-people ties, as well as our work together to confront common challenges from climate change to workforce development and health security. As we think about the future of artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and building resilient supply chains for clean energy technologies, semiconductors, and other critical and emerging technology, countering climate change, the future of our workforces, and global health, energy, food security, there is no partner more consequential than India. Now, we're hosting India for an official state visit to put our cooperation on an inexorable trajectory as we support India's emergence as a great power that will be central to ensuring U.S. interests in the coming decades. After years of strengthening our ties, the United States-India partnership is deeper and more expansive than it has ever been in the past.
Right, and that's John Kirby speaking on how U.S. is looking at Prime Minister Modi's visit to India, about deepening U.S.-India relations. And these are the celebration shots that emerged as Prime Minister Modi landed in New York. You have celebrations outside the hotel where Prime Minister is expected shortly, as well as celebrations and waving of the Indian flag by the Indian diaspora as Prime Minister Modi arrived at the New York airport. There's lots of things lined up over the next few days, but in moments from now, as Prime Minister Modi will be reaching the hotel, he would also be meeting several leaders. And all of this is being seen extremely crucial by both the countries, particularly as they look at deepening their bilateral relations, particularly in the defense as well as tech segments. And there have been dialogues which have been going on for several months at several levels on different strategic partnerships. And this meeting between US President as well as Indian Prime Minister is being seen very, very closely, not only by the Indian diaspora or the US and India as nations, but also by world leaders across the globe. This also comes at a very crucial time for the geopolitical challenges that the world is facing, whether it be with respect to the challenges emerging out of oil or even with Russia and the Ukraine war that has been going on. The economic crisis that several parts of the world seem to be staring at, and the forecast being very grim for the world over. Ajay Jain Bhuturia, who is the Indian American community leader, joins us right now again. Ajay, Prime Minister Modi shortly to arrive at the hotel where he will be meeting certain leaders. Now, how do you all look at this meeting that is going to happen? You know, Elon Musk, who's of course looking for a market in India, he's looking, there has been raking which has been going on to zero in where should his production manufacturing center be set up in India, and that's going to be extremely big for India. But there's also an interesting angle to this. This meeting also comes as he's taken over Twitter. So how are you looking at this?
Well, I think it's very exciting. The Tesla factory, which manufactures the Tesla cars, is almost 4 miles away from where I live in Fremont. So it's wonderful to see Prime Minister Modi meeting Elon Musk. I think on the Tesla side, if we look at this